boys and girls. Did you happen to notice this big, huge pile? You know, on each one of these little plaques that were sitting on my chair today was one of the topics that we have talked about in this 12-week series. And if we go back all the way to the very first one, we talked about because of Jesus. How should we act? How should we think? What should our life be like if we are followers of Jesus? Now, I have to tell you, when we started this series, I didn't think we would get through all of these, but we have. Yep. And now we have completed all of them. And you might have noticed there was kind of a pattern. In every single one of these actions or thoughts, we discovered it wasn't something that we could do on our own strength. It all came back to the very first plaque. Because of Jesus, we want to live a life that is, well, full of faith, or serves willingly, or expects miracles, or any one of these ideas. We found out it couldn't be something we just did on our own strength. So I thought it would be good if we came back to that very first plaque to end our series and talk about, well, how it's all about Jesus. And I kind of wish I had a plaque that said that, all about Jesus, but that's the title of our story today. But of course, before we start, let's talk to Jesus, shall we? Let me put these to the side. Dear Lord Jesus, I thank you that the boys and girls and I can be together here at nearing the end of July, thinking about how we want to act and think and behave because we're followers of you. I pray, Father, that the things that we've talked about have gone deep into their hearts, and it's changed all of us to be more faithful followers of you. Help us as we have our last little talk together today about how we act because of you. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, when I was 12 years old, I got to do something that was pretty special that summer. I got to go to camp. Now, you might be thinking this year, well, it was pretty special if you got to go to camp. But you see, that year it was special because my grandfather owned a Bible camp. He was like in charge. And I had gone as a camper. I had gone with my mom and dad and stayed in their cabin, but I had never gone as a worker before. So that which when my grandpa asked me if I would like to work at camp, I immediately said yes. I was very excited about the opportunity. In my mind, I thought about what I would get to do. I first thought maybe I would get to be a counselor. But then I realized that most of the counselors, well, they were a lot older than 12. Then I thought I might get to work in the canteen. Oh yes, I could sell people candy and water and pop and all kinds of snacks and t-shirts. Oh, that'd be great. But then I realized at 12, my grandpa might not trust me to be in charge of all the money. Then I thought, well, I kind of like crafts. I would be good at that. That's what I finally decided. I was going to be the craft teacher. So you can imagine my disappointment when I discovered that at 12, even though your grandpa owned the camp, if you got to work, you got to work in the kitchen. Oh, yeah. And you didn't get to do fun things. You got to wash dishes. And I have to tell you, our camp did not have a dishwasher. So every day that summer, 3 times a day, you could find me washing dishes in the kitchen. Well, it had gotten to about this point in July. It was hot and steamy and sticky, kind of like it was last weekend. Working in the kitchen, well, it wasn't the most favorite job. But I discovered by the middle of July, well, there's something that goes on with camp workers. If you've only been to camp and never been a worker, you might not have known this little secret. But by the middle of July, even camp workers can get a little bit, well, crabby. And at the end of this week of camp, my grandpa had noticed that there was kind of an attitude spreading through some of the workers. And so he had called for a special meeting on the Saturday after camp. Now, kind of like the camps that our kids go to at Bethel, well, camp ended on Friday and the new camp came in on Sunday. So usually camp workers had Friday night and Saturday, well, kind of off. It was their little vacation. So you can imagine when Grandpa told all of the workers that they would be having like a special, well, meetings on Saturday, that no one was too happy about it. To make matters worse, I overheard some of the counselors kind of grumbling among themselves. They had special plans that they were going to do. And the biggest thing is that they were going to go into town and get burgers and fries. But now, they all had to stay for a special meeting. Now, when you work in the kitchen, you also overhear things a lot, especially if you're washing dishes or peeling potatoes. And I had heard my grandpa mention to my grandma that they needed this special meeting so that they could spend some time talking about, well, how their attitude had to reflect Jesus. Their attitude had to be one of serving willingly. They needed to have thankful hearts. They needed to be filled with joy. Well, and a lot of the things we had talked about. But I knew what they really wanted, more than great attitudes, more than, well, being filled with faith, more than serving willingly, was a burger and fries from the restaurant in town. I have to admit, the camp that I went to didn't always have the best food. Well, Friday came, the campers left, the cabins got cleaned, and my grandpa reminded all of the workers that bright and early tomorrow the meetings would start. And then he asked if I would stay after the gathering. He dismissed all the rest of the workers to have the evening off, but he wanted to talk to me. Kimberly, he said, we have a little bit of a problem. Mrs. Seary, who was the cook for the camp, well, someone close to her, well, that person's husband has died and the funeral is tomorrow. Mrs. Seary didn't realize, because I didn't do a very good job of communicating, said Grandpa, that we were going to be having special meetings. So she had planned to go to this funeral, which means we don't have anyone to cook for us for our special noon meeting tomorrow. Do you think you could help out? Oh, I felt so honored. Now, I really shouldn't have, because, well, at 12, I was not a good cook. But don't worry, said Grandpa. It's not like you have to make a hot meal. I just thought if you could put together some sandwiches, we could do chips and some fruit, and you can just kind of get it organized for us. That would really help out a lot. Well, this felt like a great promotion to me, moving up from dishwasher to cook. Of course I can, I said to Grandpa. Well, everyone decided that the next morning they would just do cold cereal and milk, toast for breakfast. So that was easy. I had no problem setting the things out. And then my grandpa started the meeting with all of the workers. I realized that they were going to be meeting in the dining hall. So right there, I would be cooking. I had to be pretty quiet, but I figured making sandwiches, that wasn't going to be a problem. So as my grandpa started to talk to the kids who were counselors and lifeguards and people who worked at the beach and people who did cleaning and worked in the canteen, he talked to them about how he knew, Well, they all had come to camp, well, because they loved Jesus. They wanted to serve him. They wanted to other boys and girls to know about Jesus. But it was July, and it was hot, and it was sticky, and they had been working for 6 weeks, and he knew that they were tired. He didn't blame them for being tired, but then he said, here's something that's really important. When you're working for Jesus, when you're a follower of Jesus, if you start to do it in your own strength, well, you kind of lose energy. You can get kind of focused on the wrong thing. Said Grandpa, I want you to know that I understand that this is hard work that you've been doing. And I want you to know that I am committing to pray for you even more these last 4 weeks of camp. But I just really encourage you, he said, not to do it in your own strength, but to let Jesus fill you with his power. Because, well, when he does, great things can be accomplished. I don't know what God has planned for the last 4 weeks of camp, said Grandpa, but I know that he brought each one of you here for a special reason. I couldn't help but listen in the kitchen. Maybe he had brought me to camp for this special reason too. I didn't know what it was, but suddenly I didn't feel so bad about being a dishwasher. And as I thought about the fact that now today I was cook, I just decided it would be really good if I could do something to kind of encourage all of these counselors and lifeguards and beach workers and cleaners and canteen workers and craft people. If I could just do something that just encouraged them, maybe that's why I was here. And then I came up with a brilliant idea. I would make them fresh cookies. I mean, who doesn't like the smell of chocolate melting in the oven? Who doesn't like that smell of fresh baked cookies? And picking them up and they're so hot you can hardly hold them? Well, it would be like my gift to all of them. And so I got busy. I got out the eggs and the flour and the sugar. I had the recipe pretty good in my head because, well, my dad liked cookies and I had made cookies before. The only problem was when I made cookies at home, all I had to do was turn on the dial and the oven started to heat up. But at camp, we had the oldest stove you could imagine. It was a gas stove. You had to turn on the gas. You had to wait to the count of 10, according to Mrs. Siri, and then you had to quickly light a match and stick it in the oven. There'd be a small little poof, and the oven would begin to heat. You had to watch it pretty carefully because, well, there wasn't a dial that said 350. No, you had a little small thermometer that went inside and you had to watch it. I knew that if I wasn't careful, there was going to be a really good likelihood that instead of wonderful cookie smell, there was going to be burnt cookie smell. But I was determined. When the cookie dough was all mixed up and scooped out on the big trays, I went over to the old stove. Mrs. Siri called the stove Bertha. Well, Bertha, I said, it's just you and me. I've watched Mrs. Siri turn this on a bunch of times. Now, I should have realized that even as I thought that, only Mrs. Siri had turned on that stove. No one else had been allowed, not even the assistant cooks, when there was one, but certainly never a 12-year-old dishwasher. I turned the dial and I could hear the little zzz of the gas as it started. Now, what I should have done was open the oven while the gas was starting, but I didn't remember that part. I did remember to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The hiss continued. 7, 8, 9, 10. I opened the oven door and I grabbed one of the big long matches that Mrs. Siri used. I grabbed also the matchbox and I struck it along the side. I wondered why Mrs. Siri always used these long matches instead of a little short one, but, well, this is what she did. I reached in with a nice long match, waiting to hear the poof as the oven, well, ignited. But instead of a poof, my match went out. Well, that was strange. I grabbed another one. I struck it along the side of the box. I leaned in again, not too close, and my match went out again. I must need to get closer. Mrs. Siri always stayed pretty far back, but, maybe she had longer arms than I did. So I grabbed a third match, struck it alongside the box, and I reached it all of the way, and the oven went boom, like that. It was the loudest boom I'd ever heard, and my face felt hot and sticky. Smoke filled the kitchen, and I could hear footsteps coming, running. Not only had the boom surprised me, it had surprised everyone who was in the camp meeting in the dining room. "Kimberly," said my grandpa, "are you all right?" I turned and looked, and there was my grandpa standing with all of the counselors, and they all had huge eyes. They all looked so surprised. "Kimberly, what are you doing with this oven on?" said my grandpa, and he ran over and he flipped the switch, turning off the gas. And suddenly, I was embarrassed and ashamed and confused all at once. And without a word, I ran out of the dining room, out of the building where we had our meals, down toward the path that led up into the woods to a special place that I like to go to pray. Wasn't just me. The place was called Prayer Hill. I ran all the way through the woods up the hill to the very top, and I found my special rock and I sat down. And I'm not ashamed to tell you, I cried and I cried and I cried. I had only been trying to do something kind, and now everyone thought I was a complete loser. I probably almost blew up the dining room. Grandpa was mad, and no camp workers were encouraged, because not only was there not going to be cookies, but based on the amount of smoke in the dining room, I wasn't sure anybody even would want to eat the sandwiches I'd made. I sat there and all I could think of was, oh, God, I am never, ever going to be able to do anything to help or serve you. I'm never going to be trusted to do any kind of ministry. I'm never going to be asked back to camp again. And the more I thought, the more sorry I felt for myself, and the more I cried. In fact, I was crying so loud I didn't hear footsteps coming up the hill toward that special rock I had at the top of Prayer Hill. Kimberly. I knew that voice. It was my grandpa. Kimberly, are you okay? I am such a loser. I said to my grandpa, I am never going to be able to do anything for Jesus. I mean, you can hardly even trust me with washing dishes. And then I had one job this week to just make sandwiches and stay out of everybody's way. But instead, I interrupt your whole meeting. I almost blew up the building. And whoa, said Grandpa, what are you talking about? Well, I can't serve Jesus. I don't even know why I'm here. I just wanted to. I just wanted to make him happy, but no, I'm not a good Christian at all, Grandpa. Grandpa was quiet for a minute, and then I could hear him kind of chuckle a little bit. You know, Kimberly, I happen to think that never might be Satan's favorite word. What? I said, what are you talking about? Well, what you were saying, how you're never going to be a good Christian, you're never going to be able to serve God, you're never going to be able to help, you're never going to be able to serve willingly, you're never going to be able to have enough faith, you're never going to be able to be thankful for washing dishes. I just heard a lot of nevers, and I kind of think that, yeah, at least when I've thought like that, I kind of think that that's one of Satan's favorite little tricks. But you see, when you start thinking like that, well, your eyes switch off of Jesus onto yourself. And you start to think that all the things that you're supposed to do to be a follower of Jesus, well, it's all about you. It's all about you trying to work really hard. It's all about you doing your best. But it's not all about you. You see, everything we do is because of Jesus. It's all about him. And when I get filled with the nevers, you know what I do? I start thinking about the alwayses. The alwayses? Yeah. One of my favorite verses says, eye has not seen nor ear heard all the things God has prepared for those who love him. And I start thinking about how God will always be with me. How God will always love me. How God will always forgive my sins. How God will always listen to me. How God will always take care of me. How God will always remember me. How God will always provide for me. How God will always be at work in your life. How God will always lead you. How God will always bless your obedience to him. How God will always come through for you. How God will always answer your prayers. And how God will always be using the things that happen to you to make you more like his son Jesus. Always. Yeah, but it just seems like it's taking forever for God to be able to use me. I know. The waiting is the hardest part, said Grandpa. But while you wait, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, take your eyes off yourself. Don't be thinking about you. Remember, it's all about Jesus. Second of all, believe that God will keep his promises to you, that his plans for you are good and perfect, and that you can't even imagine how he will use you. And third thing, be courageous. Yeah. Sometimes we end up taking some chances. And I know today, what happened in the kitchen? Well, honestly, you were doing it for the counselors and the people that work at the beach and the canteen people, the craft people, because I happen to know you don't like cookies. I don't, I said. Yeah. So you were doing something courageous for Jesus. Now, I'm not recommending that you have anything to do with that stove in the future. No. It's a little bit dangerous. But I have to believe that God is going to use this camp stove thing, well, in all of our hearts to just help us work together and serve him these last 4 weeks. You think so, Grandpa? I know so. I was thinking I was going to have to stay at Prayer Hill here for the next, 4 weeks or so, because I'd be too embarrassed to come back down. But if you really think that God could use me, I'd like to come back and do dishes for after lunch. That'd be great, said Grandpa. But before you do, you might want to stop at the bathroom and, well, you got a lot of soot on your face, and don't be surprised, your eyebrows are gone. But that's okay. That's okay. Nothing in God's word says you have to have eyebrows to serve him. I reached up and I could feel, yeah, I guess they kind of got scorched off by that crazy stove. And then Grandpa and I laughed. We walked hand in hand down the hill from Prayer Hill, down to the full camp. I stopped at the bathroom and I couldn't believe how much soot was on my face. And yeah, what happened to my eyebrows? And then I went back to the kitchen, fully prepared to jump in and do dishes from lunch. There might even be a sandwich left for me, I thought. But when I got to the kitchen, there was a big surprise. Because there in the kitchen were a bunch of counselors and the lifeguard, and, well, they were scrubbing every part of that kitchen because there was soot everywhere. They had done all the dishes, and they were laughing and talking, and somebody was mixing up a new batch of cookies. They saw me come in, and they said, "Oh, Kimberly, glad you're here. We weren't quite sure about your recipe, but boy, was the dough good. Would you mind mixing up another batch?" And Grandpa said he'd start the oven, and we could bake together. Yeah, but weren't you guys all going to go into town for... Oh, we can go into town for hamburgers and fries anytime, they said. No, Grandpa had a good message for us about, really getting our eyes off ourselves and serving God. But, well, he talked about it, but you showed us. Me? All I did is scorch off my eyebrows, I said. Now, one of the counselors laughed and said, "Yeah, you did that." But, it just reminded us that, well, it's not about us, that we're all here for Jesus. And it was true. I learned a pretty important lesson. I learned something that summer, that if I really want to be a follower of Jesus, yeah, it's got to be about him. Can't be about me. Because if it's about me, trust me, I'll mess up. But if I surrender myself to Jesus and I say, okay, I'm not really that talented, I'm not really that good at this, and sometimes I have a really bad attitude, but I don't want to. I want to be filled with joy. I want to be content. I want to be thankful. I want to be like your son, Jesus. Could you help me? And he does. And he makes us each to be more and more like his son. So, if you happen to pop into my office, you'll see all of these plaques on the wall. Yeah, it's there to remind me and to remind each of us that it's all about Jesus. It's not about our own strength or our own willpower, our own trying to do it. No, it's about Jesus working through each of us. And he is. He is at work. But in the meantime, we wait. We wait for him to make us more like his son. And as we wait, let's keep our eyes off ourselves. Let's believe that God will keep his promises. And let's be courageous. So, boys and girls, that's my prayer for you. That as you become more like Jesus, well, that he will use you. And you'll see these traits in your life as he's at work. Thanks, boys and girls.